Welcome back, everyone. I'm the Bad Luck Gamer, and we're back with another archetype. And I know you're all probably tired of ghost-related archetypes, and too bad, because we got one more. Today, we're going to be talking about the Ghost Hunter, and it is actually different than the Ghost Eater, despite its description. Now, a quick warning here, spoiler warning, though I don't feel like this particular archetype has any necessarily narrative spoilers, but you've been warned. If you are currently playing Abomination Vaults, this particular archetype comes from that series, and more specifically the Ruins of Gauntlight book. So if you're not already done with that, then well, you've been warned, but I don't think this particular archetype is going to spoil anything for you necessarily. But, just so you know. Alright, so the Ghost Hunter archetype is actually different from Ghost Eater. Well, Ghost Eater is a really good pickup. It's something that you can slap onto most characters to give them the extra abilities to handle spirits in a lot of situations. This one is a lot more narratively tied, but also this is for a different kind of ghost hunting. While Ghost Eater is for fighting spirits specifically, Ghost Hunter is more like a phasmophobia, demonologist style of character, where your biggest thing is more of dealing with haunts or undead that are necessarily not present or are more like a part of the scenery more than an actual entity, though you do get the abilities to kind of handle those entities as well. This is a lot more of that experience if you go into a haunted house and you have to bargain with the ghost or find a way to dismiss the haunting or something like that. So it's actually pretty interesting, though there are some feats that are kind of not super great, but I do like a lot of the feeling of this archetype. So let's just hop into it, shall we? Alright, so in order to pick up the initial dedication, you must be trained in either occultism or religion. Really simple and a pretty easy pickup. This is a level 2 dedication like most are, so this is one you could pretty much pick up as soon as it's available to you. Now, when you do, you become trained in either spirit lore or haunt lore, or if you're somehow trained in both for whatever reason, you become trained in a new lore skill specifically, which is very strange. I don't know why they didn't give you just any skill proficiency if you're already trained in both, but oh well. I mean, lore skills are really good, and a special note, spirit lore or haunt lore, whichever you pick, you're going to want to actually invest skill increases into because it will help with some of the later features given in this particular archetype. So that's something that's very important to keep in mind. This archetype also gives you the ability to cast occult spells, and you gain access to the cast a spell activity. Now, due to a recent errata in the books, anytime you gain access to casting cantrips of any variety, you can now just use the cast a spell activity, which does mean that if you didn't already have a cantrip or something like that, this archetype does actually allow you to use things like magic wands, or not staves specifically, but you can use magic wands or any items that require you to have the cast a spell activity available. So that's actually a really big pickup. And now you can get 2 cantrips with this archetype, but unlike most archetypes, this is a lot more limited. The cantrips you pick up can only be of enchantment or necromancy, though the occult spell list does have guidance as one of their cantrips for divination. So I would recommend that if you're going to go with this, guidance is probably one of the strongest options you can really pick up. I do think there's also days if you want to select a more attack-based cantrip, but you're not going to get that good at spell casting, and it's going to fall off pretty quick. So you're better off just picking the types of cantrips that are just always useful, like guidance. Honestly, it's really hard to go wrong with something like guidance in this situation. Now, like a lot of cantrips that you can pick up from archetypes, you do become trained in that particular type of casting. So in this case, you become trained in occult spell attacks and spell DCs, and you use charisma as your modifier for those checks. So overall, pretty standard, but a really good pickup and a very solid dedication right out the gate. If you pick up Spirit Lore, which is probably something I recommend more unless you're going into a campaign that has haunts specifically, Spirit Lore is just going to be more useful. But either one can work depending on the campaign that you're going to be in. So the next feat you're going to pick up is, or you can pick up, is Grave's Voice. A decent one, and one that very much fits the narrative style, but, you know, its uses may vary. What it does is it allows you to use either your Spirit Lore or Haunts Lore, right? Yep. To make an impression on incorporeal undead specifically. And the GM can dictate, you know, how likely they are to listen to you. It's really good if you're not a very high charisma-based character. And even though you're a charisma caster, again, you're not getting good cantrips in the beginning for your attack rolls, and you're not going to get that proficient in them anyway. So if you're just a high intelligence character with very little charisma, this is actually a pretty solid pickup. Now, if you have lots of good charisma, this is probably not likely to happen, but it doesn't say they need to understand you, and some undead only speak Necro. So this can be kind of like a talk to animal situation, which is a hidden benefit in this particular feat, but otherwise it's, you know, it's okay. It might come up in some situations. It's more of an aesthetic or narrative-based choice, I would say, rather than a mechanically beneficial one. Next up is Investigate Haunting, which is a terrible feat name. It should have been Haunting Expert or something like that. I don't know. It's just, Investigate Haunting just doesn't sound like a feat. It sounds like an action you would take. But anyway, what it does is when you're in investigation mode or exploration mode anyway, if you're not taking the investigate roll action, you still benefit from the recall knowledge checks of any haunts or spirits that might be active in the area. Not only that, but you do get a +2 circumstance bonus. Yes, circumstance bonus to skill checks to disable haunts, which is really good. And if you have haunts lore specifically, you can actually use haunts lore to disable haunts. So this bonus is actually really huge, and another benefit for increasing those initial lore skills that, or one of the initial lore skill, I should say, that you initially pick up with this dedication specifically. This one is, again, okay if you're running into haunts more frequently. I do like the ability to allow you to kind of notice haunts in exploration mode, even if it's not something you're looking for. It just allows you to get a chance to succeed at something you're not initially trying to do, which just allows you to have other options you're doing. You can be scouting for your party, knowing that you're gonna notice the haunt if you guys come across it, which is pretty good. Next up is Spirit Spells, which just enhances your general spell casting. Generally, what it does is when you pick it up at 4th level, you get a 1st level spell, and at 6th and 8th, you get a 2nd and 3rd level spell, which is pretty good, and you can cast each of these spells once per day. The only hang-up is that these spells must be similar to your cantrips from either divination, enchantment, or necromancy. So that's just something to keep in mind when you're selecting these. And again, this doesn't even give you necessarily like an improved proficiency in your casting. So when it comes to these kind of spells, I do recommend taking something like the Bless spell or Bane spell for your 1st level slot, as it's probably going to be your most beneficial one. Regardless, this is pretty good. For a single feat, you essentially get 3 spells per day, which is very solid. And overall, it just fits the aesthetic of you're using your kind of, I guess, haunt ghost-based knowledge to use certain kinds of spells, which is very cool. Next up is Ghost Strike, which is, it sounds cool, but this is actually an absolutely terrible feat, which sucks because honestly, it should be better, and there's no reason why it needs to be this bad, especially because Ghost Eater, which we did last week, you just kind of got its effects for free. So what Ghost Strike does is for 2 actions, you can enchant one of the weapons that you're currently wearing with the properties of the Ghost Touch rune. Now, because this isn't actually adding the rune to your weapon, it doesn't suppress any runes on your weapon if you're already maxed out on property runes for your weapon, which is a nice benefit. The bad part is it's 2 actions. If this was a singular action, I would feel better about it, but it's just not. And honestly, at this point, you can probably, this is 6th level, so you probably should pick one of the prior feats, in my opinion. Don't pick this one up. And if you really want this effect, either one, get a Ghost Touch property rune on one of your weapons, or dip into the Ghost Eater dedication, which will give you a lot more of the martial abilities. And honestly, blending these two archetypes together is a really good way to really just make your character the ultimate ghost hunting style character. But this one, and not only that, it's for 10 minutes once per day. So it's not even a constant effect like the Ghost Eater one would be. And at a higher level, it upgrades, but it allows you to do 2 weapons that you're wielding rather than 1, which is not helpful if you're not a dual wield style character. So honestly, even if you're picking this up as like a Thaumaturge, which is probably one of the more like types of classes that this is really good for, they're not likely to use it unless they're using the weapon implement one-handed weapon combo, which overall just makes this a really terrible feat, and not one that I recommend anyone selects for really any reason, because honestly, it's just not that relevant. And if you are in a game that it is super relevant in, you're just better off going with something like Ghost Eater, or just putting one of those weapon property runes on your weapon anyway. Regardless, it is an okay effect if you're planning on running into multiple ghosts and you just want to make your weapon be allowed to hit them. It's just a lot more effort for something that other archetypes just give you a lot more freely. All right, and before we get to this last particular feat here, I just wanted to remind you guys that if you subscribe, you can get more videos like this here on the channel. So haunt that over here. Haunt that subscription button down there if you want to see more archetype videos like this, as this is the only channel that really does them. Or you can join our Discord, linked in the description, or, just leave a like, because I put a lot of effort into these kind of videos. Anyway, on to the last feat. So the last feat here is Pure Beyond, and it's an okay feat overall. It's very situational, but it can be very clutch in the right kind of campaign, depending on the narrative that your story is about. Anyway, so the initial effect is you get a +2 circumstance bonus. I always need to check because it's important if it's status or circumstance. But yeah, you get a +2 circumstance bonus on checks to avoid mental effects caused by spirits or haunts. I think it's actually necessary. Yeah, it has to be incorporeal undead. It's not even just undead. Incorporeal undead or haunts specifically. Not only that, but you can use your spirit lore or haunt lore for your initiative if an incorporeal undead or a haunt is present at the time the combat starts, which is actually kind of big. There's not a lot of classes that get a lot of boosts to their perception, which normally is what initiative is rolled on. And because these are skills that you can actively increase, you can actually have a better initiative against some kinds of circumstances than even classes like the investigator or ranger that get up to legendary in their perception. So this is actually really, really good, and a pretty decent feature if you're fighting lots of incorporeal undead or haunts. In a more standard campaign, that both of these benefits are kind of not that great. Now, where this part particularly comes in clutch is the fact that if it's an undead that it is rejuvenating, so it haunts a site and can't be destroyed by normal means, you actually get a glimpse of insight on how you can permanently remove the haunt or the ghost if it's a permanent effect. Now, if it's a particular incorporeal undead, like your standard ghost that is sight-bound, then you use spirit lore. If it's a haunt specifically that you might not be able to completely remove, but suppress for a certain amount of time, then you use haunt lore. Now, if you get a success, you get a brief glimpse of something related to what can end the haunt or the ghost. If you get a critical success, you know the exact method needed to get rid of the ghost or the haunt, respectively. So this is a pretty decent feat in a campaign that might this might be the whole thing. This might be what the whole narrative is about. And if you're playing like a short campaign, this is really, really good. If you're not, oftentimes adventurers just kind of kill the ghost, and if they come back, who cares? We're going to be gone by the time it comes back in 2d4 days anyway. And if it's a haunt, it might be too much effort to actually go and permanently remove it. So it's just better to just suppress it anytime you're in the area. Regardless, narratively speaking, this is an incredibly powerful feat, and this allows you to essentially accomplish the goal that your character set out to do, which is to cleanse an area of a haunting or of a particular spirit that is inhabiting it. So this is necessary if it's for your character's narrative or the campaign's narrative, and less so if it's just a more standard campaign. And so you got to be the judge of that. But that is going to be it for the Ghost Hunter. And finally, we are done with ghost-related archetypes for now, I hope. It was very strange to have Ghost Eater and Ghost Hunter. I guess in the common day when Ghost Hunter type games are super relevant, people associate ghost hunting with those kinds of things, or even if the old Ghost Hunter shows. So I guess I completely understand that. It's just in the context of a fantasy RPG, ghost hunting seems like something you more actively go and kill ghosts again, rather than like trying to make them pass on or whatever. But I do like this one, and unlike Ghost Eater, this one is a lot more narratively weighted and has some very interesting things that can give your character a lot of a good flair if you're in the right style campaign. If there's not undead in your campaign, well, not a lot you can do. But that's going to be it for me. Thank you all so much for watching. Good luck with your games. Leave the bad luck to me, and I'll see you all next time. Bye.